Welcome to False Flag Weekly News, your one-stop weekly shop for what's really going on in the world. I'm Kevin Barrett with Helen Byniski. Welcome, Helen. Good to have you back.
Good to be here.
All right, so crazy week as always, maybe a little crazier than average this week. Where do we start? Well, we start with our obligatory disclaimer. We are a very, very dangerous and menacing kind of show that only people who can handle the truth should watch. Anybody who cannot handle the terrible truth about many terrible things going on in this terrible world should go to watch some cat videos or something. Anyway, don't watch False Flag Weekly News. But if you can handle hard-hitting analysis, fearless willingness to entertain hypotheses about what might be happening behind the scenes and this sort of thing, keep on watching. All right, so speaking of crazy analysis and what's going on behind the scenes, if you want to find out when the show is going to be broadcast, get on our list. And we're broadcasting live right now on Thursday evening rather than Friday morning. You would know that if you were on our list. So please get on the list, email ffwn@noliesradio.org. And if we ever get deplatformed or if we have to broadcast at a different time, you'll at least hear about it. So this week, what's going on? Well, okay, we know that's going on. We know the U.S. is occupied territory, but the whole world right now is turning into something worse than occupied territory. It's turning into a Black Swan bubble popping correction, biggest correction in history. A correction is a 10% decline in the stock market, and this happened faster than ever before in history this week. Trump says that investors are afraid of Bernie Sanders, but most analysts think it's the coronavirus. What do you think, Helen?
I think it's pretty obviously the coronavirus. Trump thinks the world revolves around him, or the world revolves around our pathetic political contest that basically most other countries in the world realize is kayfabe, pro wrestling, theatrics. The things don't change depending on who's in the White House. Right? They might change slightly. Some policies might change. Maybe an embassy gets moved here or there, depending on how far up the rear end of a certain Middle Eastern quote-unquote democracy the president lives. However, yeah, it's the coronavirus. It's stupid.
No kidding. Okay, well, I guess Trump was wrong about one more thing. Would also show up occasionally, basically taking kind of an alarmist view on this, that it's, this stuff spreads like the flu. You can't stop the flu. You're coming on to tell me about how he poo-pooed coronavirus hysteria and alarmism on the BBC. But right now, I think Anatoly Karlin is more on point. This really is a genuine disaster, and I'm sure you would agree with that.
It's a disaster, but not necessarily for all of the reasons that, well, for one thing, Anatoly Karlin, if he's saying it's exponentially more fatal than the flu, that's not the case. It hasn't killed as many people as the flu does. I don't know.
Fatality rate, the percentage of people who catch it who die.
Okay, I'm going to have to check those numbers.
2.5% of the people who catch it die, and with the flu, it's like 0.02% or something. So it's vastly, and so you run the numbers every year that half the world's population or more catches the flu. Half the world's population catches this. 2% of them die. That's many, many, many millions of people.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's definitely not a something that people shouldn't be worried about. However, I think that for those of us who are not Chinese and do not have these genes in great number that this virus seems to target, I would say we should be more worried about what the official reaction is going to be to this, because this is going to be used like 9/11 was used to push through the Patriot Act. This is going to be used to push through all manner of really unholy, disturbing police state measures. In the name of keeping us safe and healthy and everything, and I'm generally whenever there is a pandemic, it's funny because about a week before the coronavirus pandemic was basically debuted on the world news stage, I gave a presentation where I was talking about how when the propaganda starts to fail so badly that you can't unite your populations against the desired enemy of the weak, then it comes time you have to wheel out the big guns, and those are either these are issues that will unite the world, whether it's climate change, which it's kind of fizzling, an alien invasion, which I guess we're going to talk about later, or global pandemic. And global pandemic, here we come. So this is a sign that the ruling class realizes their grip on control is slipping, and they're going to really go for broke with this. And yes, we should be worried, but we should also be smart and not believe everything we read. There are a lot of baseless scare stories out there. Again, there is definitely something to worry about here, but if you're young, healthy, and not Chinese, you're much more at risk by what governments are going to do about the disease than you are about the disease itself.
And you're at risk from the collapsing economy. And that's the point that Peter Schiff made in that RT story. And it's a very short story and not real information rich compared to some of the other ones here, but it's got a great picture. And I think that does say it all. And we've been talking about this here for a few weeks now. And we saw it coming. And then this 10% loss of value in the stock market, which will be probably continuing for a while. This is really big. And so that's, I think, maybe the biggest single effect will be this economic disaster that we're starting to see picking up steam right now. Even just this afternoon, there was another collab that lost another 1,000 or 2,000 points. I can't even keep track anymore. Not that I need to, as if I have any stocks and bonds. But of course, if our False Flag Weekly News supporters donate generously, maybe someday I'll actually own a stock or a bond, but I doubt it. Anyway, in the next slide, how about this story got zapped? It's been scrubbed. You can't find this story anymore, at least at this site. I couldn't find it anywhere. So it must.
Lab, that's just stupid. So I'm kind of glad they removed this story because it's completely misleading. And the fact that people are still saying that, oh yeah, the Chinese did this themselves. No, that would be really, really dumb. Or the Chinese did this by accident. Oh, you think that these they're smart enough to run a high security biotech lab. They're smart enough to run rings around us, economically speaking, but they can't, wash their hands or decontaminate themselves properly going in. This is basically a racist suspicion that, oh yeah, the Chinese don't know how to handle their killer viruses, so they must have done it. And no, of course, when they released the pathogen, this is a U.S. bioweapon. This was released in such a way that it would be immediately suspect that the Chinese had did it. But if you look at the genetic targeting on the virus, it targets this particular enzyme that's made by these lung cells that Chinese have in larger numbers than other ethnic groups. And so the idea of the Chinese, why would they manufacture a virus that targets themselves? I mean, that's just, it doesn't pass the basic.
And of course, this is the interpretation we've been generally favoring for several weeks here on False Flag Weekly News. And you launched it actually with some articles that look pretty prophetic. You got it right a month ago, Helen. And even now, people like Pepe Escobar are catching up with us. In the next slide, we see Pepe's new article just came out a couple of days ago. And he's reading this as part of a hybrid war on China. Now, there's virtually nothing in this article that's any different from what you and I have been saying for a month. But Pepe Escobar doesn't publish something like this unless he gets confirmation from pretty well plugged in people. So he's telling us that this China knows. And I think I would take this as confirmation. Jeff Brown already said this on my radio show, but Jeff Brown is not as well connected as Pepe Escobar. So he says China knows that this is a biowarfare attack. There's a hybrid war on China going on. At the same time this hits, there's also bird flu knocking off their poultry. There's swine flu knocking off their pork. Yeah. There's Huawei being cut off from U.S. microchips. And then there's this propaganda wave that, as you said, Helen, is quite racist and disgusting. It really reminds me of what was done to Muslims and Islam after 9/11. And of course, 9/11 was designed to produce that propaganda war on Islam and Muslims and stop the Islamic awakening in its tracks. It was picking up steam in the 1990s. And it's been largely stymied by the propaganda war that 9/11 was designed to unleash. And the same thing seems to me to be happening here. Another clash of civilizations against another civilization, the same kind of racist propaganda, and it's all coming out of the same probable false flag inside job biowarfare attack. And so Pepe Escobar confirming this and doing it quite eloquently. I thought this was a great article. I think that, that speaks well to your interpretation that you wrote a great article a month ago that basically said the same thing.
Yeah, it was a good article. I mean, unfortunately, this Francis Boyle, this guy who wrote the U.S. biowarfare legislation, is again saying, oh yeah, it was China. This came out of the Chinese laboratory. But I guess he kind of has to say that since he's a U.S., although the U.S. has largely reduced him to unperson status, he can't really go around blaming them for the biowarfare that they're obviously conducting. But yeah, no, I think more and more it's starting to come out. I think more countries are saying this. I think this seems to be the view, although Russia won't say it in their state media that's read by English language people. I think that this is what they're saying among themselves. And the problem is that the Chinese can't come out and say this because then they've insulted their honor. What are they going to do in return? And so the Chinese are kind of backed into a corner because, yeah, they're experiencing major economic problems because of this. They're obviously, a lot of them are sick and a lot of them are dying, and they're doing their best. they're supposedly, the numbers that are coming out right now would suggest that the infection numbers, new infections are going down. I hope that's true, but I don't think that necessarily we're really going to get the straight story either way, because they have to defend themselves from this propaganda onslaught. And obviously, what do you defend yourself from propaganda with more propaganda? So I mean, it really is unfortunate that the sociopaths that are in control of our government feel that it's okay to do something like this, because we're making ourselves an international pariah, as if we weren't one already. And always the suffering accrues to the lowest people on the ladder. So the elites are the ones who commit the crimes, and the little guy is always the one who gets in the ass. It's really unfortunate.
Yeah, well, but Pepe had a, his analysis here is, of course, that China's rise is so so it's so unstoppable by any other means. You can't win a World War III nuclear war with them. Can't win a non-nuclear war. Nothing really can be done but something like this. And a couple of great sentences from Pepe Escobar's article are, well, one is he says it's up to Chinese virologists to decode its arguably synthetic origin. How China reacts, depending on the findings, will have earth-shattering consequences, literally. Well, I hope not literally. And he also pointed out that the assassination of General Soleimani plus the coronavirus has set the stage for what will be the Roaring Twenties. And I think that's important to note, that it looks like these two outrageous acts of launching a world war, killing Soleimani and launching this biological war on China together at the same moment. And this is really comparable to the moves that started big wars in the past. And so it's quite disturbing, to say the least.
Yeah, it just shows that there's no level they are not willing to sink to just because this is it. This is the US is scrambling for what it feels is survival, but really it's the empire scrambling for survival. I think most Americans would be perfectly happy being a part of a multipolar world, but the people in control can't deal with that. They have to be the only one on the world stage who has the ability to destroy the world. So they're just, practicing destroying the world a little bit.
So could American leadership actually fundamentally change character? Well, some people hold out hopes of somebody like Bernie Sanders got elected. That might actually shake things up a bit and maybe even change things. Well, the Zionists are freaking out. They think it's certainly not going to be good for Israel. And this article describes Matt Brooks, who is the Republican Jewish Coalition's executive director, ranting and raving and tearing his hair out about the possibility of President Bernie Sanders being the first Jewish president. And he doesn't like Israel. I mean, it sounds like a good news and a bad news joke from the AIPAC crowd, right? The good news is we got a Jewish president, not just a slave of AIPAC president, but a real Jewish president. The bad news is Bernie Sanders, and he doesn't like Israel that much. So yeah, the next slide too points out that Bernie got into a rhetorical war of words with the Zionists this week, talking about bigotry. He says accused AIPAC of bigotry, accused Netanyahu of bigotry, and he says that he would try to work with both the Israelis and the Palestinians. So that puts him outside the pale, and so this could cause him some trouble in the campaign, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's just funny how they're still talking about Russian meddling and stuff. And it's like, here's Israel basically saying, oh, yeah, we need to stop Bernie Sanders. I mean, I think we had this as a story a couple of weeks ago, but AIPAC is literally coming out saying, we need to stop Bernie Sanders. We can't have this, because having Bernie Sanders out there kind of gives the lie to this whole, the mainstream Jewish opinion is that everybody loves Israel. Actually, it's not. I mean, if you ask a bunch of Jewish people on the street, ordinary Jewish people, not elites, they're probably going to say that they don't feel so great about what Israel is doing right now. And that's because they're normal human beings. And normal human beings look at what Israel is doing right now and they think, oh my God, that's terrifying, or that's disgusting, or that's evil, using that four-letter word, evil. Bernie Sanders won't actually come out and do that. However, he will say the water is wet level of obviousness as, AIPAC is where racists gather to celebrate their racism. And it's funny because AIPAC then came back with, Bernie Sanders has never been to one of our gatherings, and how does he know? It's like the Ku Klux Klan coming out and saying, well, Bernie Sanders has never been to a cross burning. How does he know it's not just like a good time? It's like, come on, guys, can you please just dry up and blow away? Nobody likes you.
So Bernie didn't just call AIPAC racist. He called Netanyahu, quote, a reactionary racist. And coming from a nice lefty like Bernie Sanders, calling him a reactionary, that's almost as bad as calling him a racist. So that's a pretty hard-hitting 1-2 punch. And Netanyahu, instead of punching back, kind of stepped aside and didn't want to get involved in that one. But bottom line here is so okay, maybe Bernie Sanders could have a positive effect on the insane Israel policies right now, but more importantly, I think that if Bernie Sanders were somehow elected in a landslide that gave him people in Congress that supported his agenda, we would see some real change. Because what is that agenda? Well, it's a massive change in the way the U.S. does business by essentially stopping throwing money at the military-industrial complex and at the billionaires and using it for the welfare of ordinary people. Now, this is a huge change. This is why we destroyed Iraq, was because Saddam Hussein used too much of his oil money for the good of his own people. He was a bad guy in a lot of ways, but we destroyed his country, not because of him being a bad guy, but because of the good things he did. Same thing with Gaddafi. And so Bernie Sanders, he's the equivalent of a Gaddafi or a Saddam Hussein in that respect, in using resources for one's own people. And this is heresy in the contemporary climate. So I do think there is at least a whiff of change in this candidacy. It's quite bizarre. To me, this is kind of another Black Swan, an actual presidential candidacy in a major party that has a whiff of real change. I mean, am I crazy, Helen, to think that?
Well, it's like I was very pro-Bernie in 2016 until he threw all of his supporters under the bus by telling us to vote for the candidate that he had just spent the entire electoral season rightly denigrating. So I'm a little hesitant to trust him this time around. And also Saddam Hussein and Gaddafi were disposed of because they dumped the dollar, not because of necessarily what they were doing for their people. However, they were both doing probably the U.S. doesn't like people in the Middle East who they refer to as dictators doing more for their people than the U.S. ever has or ever will do. And also Gaddafi's whole going on the Pan-African gold dinar. Now, if Bernie Sanders were proposing dropping the Fed and adopting some form of currency that wasn't tied to the collective delusions of the ruling class, that would be, I think he would pretty soon find himself up a creek, metaphorically or literally without a paddle. I mean, he's definitely the best that the candidate pool has to offer right now, except for maybe Tulsi Gabbard, but she is not really going anywhere as far as the election goes. Maybe a Bernie Tulsi candidacy would make me more willing to have faith in his ability to follow through with this dispensing with the permanent war situation, because he used to take a lot of money from arms manufacturers. And while he supposedly doesn't anymore, you don't spend your entire life taking money from the military industrial complex and then suddenly turn around and say, I don't like you anymore. And I mean, who do you believe? So I would like to see him follow through on his promises. I think that, again, he's the best that the pool has to offer. However, forgive me if I don't open my wallet and start pouring it into his campaign.
No, I'm not going to throw my hard-earned false flag weekly news dollars at Bernie Sanders either. But at least I'm kind of raising my eyebrows at this interesting phenomenon. And well, if Bernie were to go after the international bankers, and if he were to genuinely support the liberation of Palestine, he would be called a Nazi. Wait a minute, he's already being called a Nazi. Here's Chris Matthews comparing his victory to the Nazi invasion of France, and saying other crazy things. Like Bernie gets in power, it's going to be like if Fidel Castro and the Reds won the Cold War, there would have been executions in Central Park. So I guess he's scaring somebody, which is good.
Yeah, but then you also have to wonder, is this a performance? They know that everybody hates the media, the mainstream media at least. So are they testing to see if we really, really just pile on? Although I might be just taking this thought experiment a little too far. I mean, I'm really enjoying watching Chris Matthews go completely insane over the prospect of a Bernie Sanders presidency. That whole line about lining up journalists and shooting them in Central Park. I mean, I'm sure that there are people who have had that fantasy. I don't think Sanders is one of them. I mean, he's a pretty peaceful guy, as much as he might.
Yeah, well, Trump is the guy who's going to shoot people on Fifth Avenue, and I don't think Bernie's going to be shooting people in Central Park.
I don't think Trump is even going to shoot people on Fifth Avenue. He doesn't have to. There's people who are willing to do that for him. This is, so the overreaction to the Sanders thing is just completely ridiculous. People, the brown shirt thing and the Maginot Line thing, and it's the long list of like completely insane, over the top statements that have been made about Bernie Sanders, and you could fill a whole article with just those.
Yeah, well, maybe maybe you're right, Helen. Maybe they're tricking us again because when the media hated Trump and was so outraged by things Trump said when he was running in his primaries, that was actually I couldn't help kind of thinking, well, that's kind of cool that there's this guy that that the establishment hates that much. So maybe they figured it out. Maybe this is all a big plot. And I'm just not enough of a paranoid conspiracy theorist to see it yet. But give me another year or two and see how it works out.
There was one MSNBC person, they talked to a New Hampshire voter after the primary on MSNBC, and they asked her why she had voted for, well, first they asked her who she had voted for, then she said why. And she said Bernie Sanders, and she said that she hadn't really made up her mind, but she saw how much MSNBC was attacking the guy, and she decided to go with him. And this was on MSNBC that they were talking about this. Great. So there's definitely something going on. I don't know exactly what it is. I mean, whatever, you wait and see.
Yeah, well, the attacks on Bernie are sort of at the top. It's almost impossible to satirize them. But I did try with having a Michael Bloomberg op-ed arguing, or a commercial arguing, that Bernie Sanders is a hateful anti-MBGTQ bigot. He is a proud member of the most victimized and oppressed group in America, the millionaires, billionaires, trillionaires, and quadrillionaires. I, Michael Bloomberg, am appalled by Sanders' shameless slurs against one of America's most vulnerable groups. I mean, it's, the trouble is when I write this kind of satire, I'm afraid that it's going to give Bloomberg ideas.
Well, it's already come true. I mean, Howard Schultz was the one saying that we shouldn't call them billionaires, we should call them people of means. And so, like, when I saw this, I had like opened a bunch of windows, and so I didn't immediately know that this was your piece. And I'm reading through it, and I'm like, did he really say that? Because Bloomberg has said a bunch of shit that is just crazy, like that nobody in their right mind would ever say. He's a real life cartoon character, some kind of combination of like Mr. Burns from The Simpsons and the Grinch. It even looks like both of them.
Did you see this expose of his tape?
Yeah.
His speech?
There's about a billion of these. There's about a billion of these tapes of him saying things that just no human being would ever in their right mind say, especially if they're planning on running for public office. But he's just insulated himself from reality so thoroughly with his billions that he doesn't have to play by the same rules as everybody else, and he knows it. And so he hasn't. And so there's just going to be more and more of these, and he doesn't get the hint. People don't like him. And even if he shoves his ads down people's throats and buys all the polling places in the world, like, he's literally going to have to purchase the election, as in pay off every single person who's counting the votes to get them to, because people don't like this guy, and it's for good reason. He hates poor people, he hates Black people, he hates women, he hates everybody who aren't him. Like, he hates everybody who's not MBTQ.
Well, he's this tape has him saying stuff like, he's the rise of Bernie Sanders and this share the wealth movement. He says, we've seen this before. Society blows up, and they do set up the guillotines, and the guillotines don't have to chop your head off. They could be confiscatory taxes. They could be seizing the endowments of institutions and philanthropic organizations. Wow. So he has that diamond-studded tear is dripping from his eye as he whines about this MBTQ bigotry. Well, you can't make this stuff up anymore. It's turning into a unsatirizable situation. Well, another interesting item from the primary race is Tulsi Gabbard plugging James Douglas's JFK and the Unspeakable, which is one of the best books, not the best book, about the Kennedy assassination. If you're going to read two books, read this book and then read Michael Collins Piper's book, Final Judgment, because that covers the Israeli angle, which nothing else does. And you'll pretty much have the JFK assassination down. And Douglas's thesis is that our military-industrial complex, and especially its most rabid extremist members, killed Kennedy. And that's largely true. And having Tulsi Gabbard reading that book on the campaign trail and plugging it is really interesting.
Yep, I'm sure she's sending a message with that. I know who you are, and I know what you're capable of doing, would be my guess of the message she's sending. I mean, she's a smart lady. She knows what she's up against. And like I said, I wish she was doing better in the polls, because I kind of I at least trust her on war more than I trust Bernie. Bernie was pro-bombing of Yugoslavia. Bernie was I think he was pro-bombing of Afghanistan too. And I know he was, he signed on with the whole let's get rid of Saddam thing in 1998. So while he was against Iraq later, he can't be trusted on this whole foreign policy thing. I think his domestic policies are solid, but foreign policy, you need money for the domestic policy somehow, and the only way you're going to get that is by curtailing this thing. But yeah, I'm glad that Tulsi is learning about the real people who are behind the scenes running the show. If she didn't already know, I know she used to be with Council on Foreign Relations, so chances are she already knows some of these people, but whatever.
Yeah, well, Tulsi is pretty sharp, and maybe she's not only sending that message as you described it, Helen, but maybe she's also sending a message to Bernie Sanders that you might want some assassination insurance with your vice presidential pick, and she would represent that kind of assassination insurance, because rubbing off Sanders to get Tulsi Gabbard really probably wouldn't be a very good deal for the kind of people that would consider killing presidents. So maybe that's her game. I don't know. If it is, more power to her.
That would be a smart move. I hadn't even thought of that, but that's a good one.
Okay, well, the big question though is what happens if Trump doesn't leave? And seriously, this is an interesting question. I mean, these liberal left, Trump derangement syndrome people, of course, are maybe exaggerating this. Well, I don't know. 27 times Trump has joked that he's not going to leave office. He's not going to leave even after he finishes his second term. He's just going to stay and be dictator for life. Ha, ha, ha. Wouldn't that be fun to be dictator for life? He just keeps joking about this. And the thing is, well, maybe he, if he lost in a landslide, maybe he wouldn't try it. But if it was close, as this article says, the litigious showman might claim that the election was rigged against him and theatrically contest the results in court. Yeah, I think he might do that. What do you think, Helen?
It's possible, depending on who he supposedly lost to. I mean, if it was a case where Bloomberg bought the nomination and then Bloomberg bought the general election, I can see Trump sticking around to contest those results in court, and I think that he should do that if that's the case. If it's something where there's a legitimate candidate that he's up against, if they do, for some reason, let Sanders get the nomination and he loses by just a little bit and he sticks around, I can kind of see that happening too, but it's less likely. I think that largely this is an overblown Orange Man bad scare story. However, there is that slight possibility that depending on, I think, this presidency thing is a big headache for Donald Trump. He likes being the man, but he's really sick of having everybody against him, and he's not getting what he wants necessarily. And I think he would like to bow out, maybe, if that chance was presented to make it look like a victory. But I don't know if there's a way to lose an election and have it look like a victory. So I think he would like to retire at the end of 2 terms, basically. I don't think that...
So he is just joking.
27 times is a lot of times. I don't know. I mean, it's generally, though, just anything written in Salon about Trump is probably likely to be largely exaggerated. I don't know. It's a possibility, but it's a very small one. And it's a moot point unless we have a legitimate candidate from the Democratic side. So
what I would be more concerned about would be, these Israeli cybersecurity companies that DHS is hiring to run election simulations, simulating an election where terrorist attacks cause the election to be canceled. And in that sort of situation, I could see Trump seeing the opportunity to become a kind of a permanent authoritarian, dictatorial figure. And that's what I would be concerned about, because his personality is such that the people who might want a more authoritarian society, if they're going all out war with China, for example, would say, well, how are we going to do that? Well, we just are going to have to go to this, fascist kind of authoritarian model, have a cult of personality, put up somebody like Trump, who is popular among a lot of the gung-ho types in the military who are going to have to fight the war with China. So let's just make him dictator and have our war. That's I wouldn't put it past them.
Yeah, definitely. I can see there being a cyber attack. Oh no, we can't have an election now. That would be, giving them what they want. Like, they're stealing our democracy. We can't have democracy. The whole contradicting web of illogic that they like to weave in situations like this. Yes, very much so. There's going to be all kinds of cyber shenanigans going on. There are so many companies that you can't even really keep track of them anymore. There's Cyber Reasons, Cyberdome. Those are just the 2 I can remember off the top of my head.
They also have Israeli links. Yeah, where are they all in Israel? What's that about?
Yeah, so it's almost like there's some sort of drive to run the world's technology. Like, that's really no.
Yeah, well, okay. So Trump is he's taking his lumps in Salon, of course, but over at Fox News, we have them cheering on Trump for suing the New York Times for its Trump-Russia quid pro quo op-ed published by one of these op-ed writers. And I don't know, do you think Trump has a case here? I mean, it may be true that that interpretation of the Trump-Russia quid pro quo in that op-ed is exaggerated, maybe even wrong, but I don't think it's all that unreasonable of an interpretation. So I think this is kind of a ridiculous lawsuit.
I actually don't think it's that ridiculous of a lawsuit, because they did cross a little bit of a line there by saying Trump and Putin had an overarching agreement. An agreement is an actual thing that can be fact-checked, that has to exist. I mean, they didn't specify it was a written or a spoken agreement, but I mean, the sum total of all of the lies that have been leveled against Trump about Russian collusion, I mean, I wouldn't pursue this case if I were his legal advisor, because you're not going to win and you're going to look like the guy who's clamping down on the press, which he already looks like enough with Julian Assange, which we're going to talk about later. But he kind of sort of has a case here. Now, the writer could argue that they're just going on based on the lies that the New York Times has previously reported, which is true as well. So again, this is kind of a thing where I can see both sides of the argument. I don't think that Trump should have filed this lawsuit. However, he kind of does have a case, because that's just straight up a thing that is objectively false. That I mean, unless they have proof that they haven't shown anybody. Supposedly there's all this proof of Russian collusion that the intelligence agencies have that's classified, but nobody's ever seen it. I don't think it exists.
Yeah, you know, even if it's a bad interpretation, and I think it is, what's bad about it is that it's being forced on everybody's throats by these big, powerful media monopolies. That's what I really don't like about the Trump-Russia collusion story. But as an interpretation of events, the idea that there was an overarching agreement, it's not all that different from me saying that PNAC's document, Rebuilding America's Defenses, called for a new Pearl Harbor and was, you know, revealed the intellectual authors of 9/11. Now that's my interpretation of events. And I don't have smoking gun proof that anybody on PNAC was actually hands-on involved in blowing up the Twin Towers or anything like that. But as you know, when we are journalists or historians, we look at a whole broad range of facts and we do some dot connecting and we come up with these interpretations. And so I don't think, I shouldn't be sued by anybody from PNAC. I shouldn't be sued for saying that the book Coup d'etat Practical Handbook by Luttwak is a handbook for the 9/11 perpetrators, which I've repeatedly said. And I can't prove that. I don't have smoking gun evidence for it, but I think it's a defensible interpretation. This may be a less defensible interpretation in my opinion, but it's still that kind of interpretation. And you can't be sued for a libel by a public figure when you're making that kind of interpretation.
Well, I would say that what you're talking about as far as being the intellectual authors of something, that's clearly a metaphor. And I mean, intellectual author is not a thing that like is a concrete thing that it's, I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm splitting hairs here in an attempt, because I personally find the Russiagate hoax so intellectually insulting. But it does seem to me that there's a little bit of a qualitative difference here. I mean, I was with this article here. I don't know if it was this article or another one about the lawsuit, that there has to be some sort of malice involved in, or a deliberate bad faith involved in actually perpetrating the lie. It can't just be a lie or a mistake or something like that. They have to know it's a lie and put it out as such. That's the part that's going to be hard to prove, and that's why Trump is not going to win this case.
Exactly.
However, I think it's like the New York Times has been knowingly lying about things for quite a while. However, it's also like, who lied? Is it the writer or the source that they have that lied? So it's, again, suing a newspaper for libel is generally, unless there's some clearly blatant falsehood that is obviously designed to harm a person in some way. I think this is just Trump's way of saying, like, simmer down, guys, because this is from years ago. This thing. I think this is.
Well, isn't this just like sort of a narcissist lashing out at stuff he doesn't like, at criticism of his august person?
Got his Twitter for that. I mean, this is from more than a year
That's
ago.
another way of lashing out. I mean, he is famously litigious. He had Webster Tarpley, he cringy. He reduced Webster Tarpley to quivering jelly, and that's pretty hard to do. I've tried to do that on my radio show and never succeeded. But when
Webster Tarpley reduced himself to quivering jelly. Webster Tarpley went from being an intelligent critic of the ruling class and the American empire and everything to an orange man, bad, frothing Trump maniac, for reasons which really are not immediately clear to anyone. I mean, I used to have a lot of respect for his work, but for some reason, the Trump election really did something to him. I don't know, or maybe somebody else did something to him. I don't know. I miss the old Webster Tarpley. Let's put it that way.
Well, Webster thinks everybody is a new Hitler. He thought Obama was a new Hitler, and Trump actually looks a lot more like a new Hitler than Obama does. Not that either one of them are precise carbon copies. Anyway, so Tarpley did just that lawsuit around Trump's, talking about Trump's wife's background. Gordon Duff at Errors Today has written vastly worse things about Trump's wife's dubious background. And he hasn't been sued yet, so that'll be interesting.
Nobody takes him seriously. People take Webster Tarpley seriously.
Really?
Everybody knows Gordon Duff is making stuff up.
I don't know. I think Veterans Today actually probably has more influence now than Webster Tarpley does.
Sure.
Yeah.
Webster. People stopped listening to Webster after 2016 when he did that weird thing. Whatever he did, he doesn't. I don't think he commands as much respect as he used to. I don't want to bash Webster.
Let's leave Webster alone and go back to bashing Trump or arguing about Trump anyway. So Trump is lashing out at people legally, and now he's lashing out at the jury of an Oliver Stone's case, saying that the foreperson of the jury was an anti-Trump person. Oh my goodness! And the judge is freaking out about it. And of course, Trump is lashing out against her too. So this is a kind of a pattern of this lashing out at everybody that he thinks doesn't like him. This is what's created the situation that he's in, where so many people hate him, is because of that narcissistic personality disorder. It's like people are unlikable when they act that way. So I mean, there is a psychological problem here, don't you think?
Oh, he's definitely a raging narcissist. I'm not disagreeing with that. But didn't this woman wrote like some anti-Trump editorial or something? She's got no business being on a jury that has anything to do with a Trump.
No, but half the country hates Trump, half the country loves Trump. So how can you have a jury that is going to be?
That's true. It's going to be hard to find someone, but you could maybe find somebody who doesn't have their name publicly associated with statements that are against the boss of the guy you're trying to convict. I mean, you do want to at least try for the appearance of impartiality. I realize that that's a really hard thing to conceive of these days when we're supposedly so divided and everybody is at each other's throats. I think this whole division thing is largely inflated and or media created situation, which again, I mean, why does everybody hate Trump? People hate Trump because they're told to hate Trump. You ask the most ravenous orange man bad liberal, what exactly is it that Trump has done that other presidents haven't done? And they're going to say something like, oh, he's racist, he's sexist. So are a lot of other presidents. And what exactly, I mean, you say that Trump is more like Hitler than Obama. Well, Trump wasn't the one who passed the law that made it so that the government can imprison somebody indefinitely without a trial, a US citizen indefinitely without a trial. Trump didn't have a kill list where every Tuesday he got his intelligence people together and said, oh, we're going to get that guy, even if they were a US citizen. Actually,
he does. Trump is bad. I think, no, he's still doing that.
He has a kill list? He has a kill list too?
Yeah, he's been killing more people, slightly more people than Obama.
Oh, he's been killing more people, yes, but he doesn't have a kill list. There's the difference. No, Trump is bad. Yes, don't get me wrong. Trump is killing a lot of innocent civilians. He's continuing Obama's wars. He's dropping more bombs than Obama. But I'm just speaking in terms of rights that are being taken away. And yes, there will be more rights taken away. I'm not defending Trump here. I'm just saying that qualitatively, yes, he's bad. But where were these protesters during Obama? Where were these? Well, there were protesters during Bush.
That's right. Obama put everybody to sleep, and Trump. Yeah.
What I'm trying to say is that this is an aesthetic thing, that people are up in arms about Trump because he's so blatant about it, but Obama was doing the same stuff.
So what do you think about Rush Limbaugh's conspiracy theory that the Democrats who set up George W. Bush to go to war with Iraq are now organizing a silent coup against Trump? The problem with that is it wasn't Democrats. Yeah, it was PNAC. PNAC isn't
No, the
Democrats.
Democrats. That's wow. Rush Limbaugh must be on some good drugs because wow,
Yeah.
that's a new one. The Democrats that set George
Okay.
Bush up for the war in Iraq. No.
Yeah, yeah. This is, what? Why do people like Rush Limbaugh have these enormous audiences? I don't. Well, why? So many of
Maybe
these
they need to
people.
feel smart.
Maybe
Maybe they
so.
need to feel
Okay.
smart.
Well, let's move on to the Homeland Security category. We have a couple of your articles, Helen, we should talk about, and I think we're at that place here. So no, maybe that's the next slide. This slide is the MSNBC guys saying that, hey, they shouldn't just be radicalizing Muslims online and convincing them to become ISIS, and let's have the FBI make bombs for people on ISIS, people on Facebook, and then go and bust them and say they're ISIS. Let's do it to the white supremacist Trump supporters too. Well, that's a great idea, isn't it?
Oh yeah, entrapment is awesome. It's not like it's like unconstitutional or illegal or anything like that. What we should be doing is maybe not entrapping anybody. What a revolutionary concept. The problem is that our law enforcement behemoth has grown so large that like they basically have nothing to do because there's not enough crime because we're all so well behaved. So like this whole we need to entrap some more people and then like load them into a building and
It's true, Helen. It's true that it's unfair that they've put so much effort into entrapping Muslims. Every mosque is swarming with these undercover con men released from prison by the FBI, so they can go into the mosques to try to find some retarded teenager to say something stupid on tape and get busted as an ISIS guy. So, I mean, that's completely insane. And that is...
Bloomberg had a whole unit of the NYPD devoted to doing just that.
Exactly. Yeah. So I guess you could say, let's do these insane things to everybody, not just the Muslims. Maybe doing it to nobody would be better. So here's the data breach, massive data breach from a facial recognition outfit. And Helen, you wrote this piece, and you're arguing that this is a much bigger story than the mainstream is telling us.
Yeah, basically this company, Clearview AI, was introduced to the public last month with a big New York Times feature about how this company is going to end privacy as we know it. And it was, oh my God, this is terrifying. It's got 3 billion images or something like that scraped from various social media sites, scraped in violation of their terms of service and probably in violation of local and federal laws. But basically this thing came out of nowhere. Supposedly it's just the private sector. I mean, there is a little hint of Peter Thiel was involved in funding it. Peter Thiel being behind Palantir and every other dystopian tech company that you can think of. But the guy who founded the company, this Hoan Ton Phat, supposedly an Australian Vietnamese former model, whose name, by the way, is an anagram of that hot anon, which if you are, an internet person, you're getting that this is trolling this guy. Because his last app, the only other app that he's known to have developed, is just puts Trump's hair on your photo. So how does a guy go from making the Trump hair photo app to making this huge database of facial recognition where you can look up you pointed it at a person and take a picture of a person and it'll scan the internet, it'll find anyone. Like CNN had live demonstrations of this, and their guy is there and they take a picture of him and it goes and finds photos of him that from years ago when he looked really different and he didn't know those photos existed online and blah, blah, blah. So this is a dystopian technology we have here, obviously. And the fact that it's violating all these laws meant that we couldn't really, come out and say that it was developed by the military, but it's pretty clearly military level technology. Now, which country's military? Is it the US? Is it Israel? Could it be both in collaboration? It's a possibility, but this is the fact that this has now been hacked. Supposedly the image thing itself wasn't hacked, but it was the client list that was hacked. So any hacker could just go find the lowest security client and go in there and access it through there. But so this technology is now out in the wild. Anybody can have it. Anybody can use it. It's so facial recognition is now going to be in the hands of. It's funny because the Australian Vietnamese former model who founded the company in his interview with CNN was like, oh no, we just want to use this to help solve crimes and find missing kids or save children. He didn't even say find missing kids. It was save children. I just want to run an American company, says the Australian Vietnamese former model. Wait, what? He's trolling. It's obviously
so now it's out there, and we probably shouldn't even announce where people can go on the internet to get a hold of this technology and run around tracking down everybody. What an Orwellian dystopia. I have a close relative who hates having her picture taken, and we always thought that that was a little strange. I'm thinking she was right. You know, going through life without having your picture taken. You know, the natives used to say that it's about stealing your soul when they take your picture. It's getting to that point. So, what about this Obama lookalike contest article, Helen? This was pretty good. I think you're onto something here.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's all the Democratic candidates. Well, not all of them, but most of them are trying to channel Obama in some ways. So there was a video that was making the rounds a few days ago of Pete Buttigieg, obviously having the same coach to make him sound like Obama, literally using the same phrases, uttered in the same way, in a kind of like B-grade Obama. Because Obama, as much as I really thought he was a scumbag, he was a great communicator, and he made the people love him, made other world leaders love him. He was very much looked up to. He's still very much respected. And so everybody wants to be Obama. And Pete Buttigieg is literally up there channeling Obama through his weird, vat-grown CIA fake, inauthentic way of communicating. It's like awkward as hell. And the videos of him and Obama side by side are hilarious. But then you've got Bloomberg, who's also running ads with Obama's voice in the background, seemingly endorsing him, although Obama has not endorsed anybody, will not endorse anybody until after the primary. And then you've got Bernie Sanders is being compared to Obama unfavorably, or not even being compared to, but unfavorably because he supposedly was going to run against him in 2012. No, that didn't happen. Harry Reid has said this didn't happen, but he's getting up there anyway. And he said something nice about Castro. Obama said something nice about Castro. Maybe we should compare them, even though neither of them have anything to do with the other. So everybody is running based on their closeness to Obama. And so I support everybody on an Obama point scale. And should all read that article because it's much funnier in person than I am.
Yeah, no, you're onto something in that article, Helen, and I highly recommend that one as well as the other. Well, here's a story that's not nearly as good, in my opinion. This Philip Haney, supposed Homeland Security whistleblower. What he says, is he a whistleblower, or was he just some crank? The Muslims are coming. The Muslims are coming. It's much worse than Homeland Security admits, was basically his message when he went to Congress. And I wouldn't be surprised if the usual suspects were backing him, and now he's found dead in California. So is that a conspiracy? I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I mean, they said what, he shot himself in the chest or something? Nobody shoots themselves in the chest. That's like not a way that people.
Well, at least he didn't shoot himself twice in the head like Gary Webb.
Yeah, I guess that they're going a little bit further up on the believability scale. But I read something today that this was now definitively not a suicide. So at least they're admitting that. I don't know much about this guy. I'm not familiar with his particular act of whistleblowing. But generally, I mean, if he's saying that there are terrorists that we don't know about, chances are that we're funding and training those terrorists. So he might be like one of the 9/11 whistleblowers who was saying, oh, they're letting in all these terrorists, or they're letting these terrorists.
Like Mike Springman.
They're our terrorists.
Wow.
Yeah, they're our terrorists.
Okay, well, he may be a legitimate whistleblower. We'll have to study this one a little closer. How about the next story? Simulated nuclear attack against Russia. 20,000 U.S. troops and 20,000 military vehicles were running Defender 2020, the military exercise targeting Russia. And then they brought in strategic command headquarters in Omaha, Nebraska, to simulate nuking Russia. I mean, no wonder Russia feels the need to interfere in our elections.
Yeah, as if they were doing that. They don't have to. We interfere in our own elections so much that, I mean, well, anyway. But yeah, this whole, winnable nuclear war. No, sorry. No, I mean, the very fact that we're still dealing with this nuclear weapon paradigm is like so idiotic. It's just, I mean, until we get the sociopaths out of government, it's just going to keep being like this, and the world is not going to move forward.
Yeah, and the real point here, which I keep trying to emphasize, is some people don't get this, is that unfortunately right now the U.S. empire is the aggressor. It's surrounding Russia with first strike systems. Russia isn't threatening to invade Europe. It's the other way around. NATO is threatening Russia and violated the solemn promise not to move NATO 1 inch eastward, and now they've totally got Russia surrounded. They're tearing up all the nuclear treaties, and they're putting in first strike systems. So, we're the bad guys. We met the enemy, and he is us. Well, there's another enemy, of course, out there too, and that's the Zionist entity. The Zionist entity actually seems to be part of one of the reasons that the USA is so bad these days. And look at this appointment. This was a must-read article from Whitney Webb. Richard Grenell, who's got all kinds of connections with the most disgusting Likudnik Israeli groups, used to work for Arthur Finkelstein, who was the kingmaker who created Netanyahu as a politician. And then Whitney Webb goes off on all these other high-level Israelis running, the current NSA director of cybersecurity, Ann Neuberger. Her husband is the chair of AIPAC's executive council in Baltimore. and on and on and on. Our whole intelligence apparatus is riddled at the top with Israeli agents. And so Trump just appointed one as the director of national intelligence. So, we're occupied.
Yep, this would answer the question you posed earlier about why are all of these these election security companies Israeli? It's like, well, all of our intelligence agencies are Israeli, and of course they're going to have their own people in both places. And yeah, this is just the fact that this guy was appointed ambassador to Germany and immediately pissed off all the German politicians should be a sign that maybe he's not doing his job very well. Maybe he doesn't.
Yeah, what a diplomat.
Promotion, but Trump is just going to keep having these people appointed on an interim basis, so they don't have to get confirmed by Congress. If you can't even get an Israeli operative confirmed by Congress, you must be a pretty crappy Israeli operative, because usually Congress can't wait to just get on its knees and start sucking as far as Israel is concerned. But I guess this guy is too bad even for them.
Could be. Well, Israel is starting to lose the public relations war to a certain extent by, just by doing the insane things they have always done. But now they get caught on camera. And this week they got caught on camera with this bulldozer picking up a Palestinian's body after the Israeli snipers murdered this guy. And then the bulldozer lifts him up and drags him around by his clothing and flails him around like a trophy or something. Typical psychopathic war criminal behavior from the Zionist occupiers of Palestine. Little by little, this stuff is soaking into the world's consciousness thanks to the alternative media.
Yeah, I mean, they can't hide it forever. It's just when you see things like this, your jaw is on the floor. Like I said earlier, this is evil. Like, this is not something that humans normally do. And this is what happens when you have a psychopathic government that's been allowed to just run rampant for decades. Nobody has told them no. And when you have a spoiled child who's never been told no, they just keep getting worse and worse and worse. And somebody has to put a stop to it. And I mean, this is ridiculous. You can't get away with this.
And of course, one of the ways that Israel runs the United States is through sexual blackmail. Jeffrey Epstein, as Whitney Webb's article showed he was an Israeli military intelligence agent at will. We're going to go from Harvey Weinstein getting busted for groping and raping and all these things while he was producing in Hollywood to the next slide. Jeffrey Epstein is now he's a legend in his own time. Well, maybe his own time or may not be. We don't know if he actually is alive somewhere. But this float at Mardi Gras was pretty clever. They had a huge orange jumpsuit, of Epstein getting strangled by Hillary Clinton, a bunch of guys in jumpsuits and gray wigs wearing nooses around their necks, dancing behind it. I mean, this is popular culture at its most subversive.
Yeah, I enjoyed this float. I mean, as much as, like, if Epstein is dead, it wasn't Hillary that killed him, obviously, or the Clintons. So that would be way too obvious. But this is funny. And I'm glad to see that Harvey Weinstein, I mean, it's funny that, like, as soon as the sentence came down, he didn't even get sentenced on the most serious charges, but as soon as the sentence came down, then it's a heart condition. Oh, got to go to the hospital. Oh, it's so predictable. It's like, and he immediately after the sentence passed down, where's his walker? His walker vanishes. He's just walking around like a normal person now. So this old, frail, poor little Harvey Weinstein. No, dude, sorry. You made your bed. You lie in it.
And the same thing's going on over in the UK. More news about the Westminster child sex abuse scandal throughout the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Top-level politicians in the UK were molesting little boys. Sir Peter Morrison became Margaret Thatcher's parliamentary private secretary in 1990, even though they all knew that he was raping little boys for decades before that. So that was just normal accepted behavior back then. And now maybe we'll find out that it's going on today, but we'll find that out in 2050.
Yeah, they just cover this stuff up as a matter of course, because you don't get into a high position unless they have blackmail on you. So it just ends up being this stuff over and over again, and it's a cycle. And obviously Epstein was part of it, supplying the blackmail material to the people, and he was controlled by other people. So it's like getting rid of Epstein just takes out the guy in the middle. The cycle continues, and this in the UK is especially bad because they've had longer to do it.
And of course, they did terrible things wherever they colonized, places like Malaysia. And going quickly in our pivot to Asia, Malaysia is in, well, not turmoil, not chaos, just uncertainty as the 9/11 truth-supporting Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad stepped down and a bid to form a new government without his big archenemy Anwar Ibrahim failed. So there will be a new choice of Prime Minister on March 2nd. I think we can leave that one and move on to Trump in India, where Trump is meeting with Modi. Now, this, you can't write satire anymore. This is an actual news story. Trump was greeted by 100,000 people singing along to the Village People's Macho Man as Trump entered the stage. Is that like a tribute to Gordon Duff's stories about Trump's homosexuality? I mean,
I don't think I mean, that's just, like you said, you can't write satire like this. This is just too funny. I mean,
right. And of course, now we're reminded that the last time Trump met Modi, Modi was complaining about China, and Trump said, well, at least it's not like you got China on your border. And Modi kind of looked at him. Apparently, Trump didn't know that China and India, the two biggest, most populous countries in the world, share a 2,500-mile border. So it's a big spectacle over there. And while the spectacle is raging, the Hindu fascist gangs are slaughtering people in the streets and burning mosques. And of course, Trump is nodding and winking at all of that.
Well, I mean, this last one looks like it's kind of one of these things where they gin up the thing by having people on both sides in order to justify a crackdown. So I don't know, there seems to be more to this than just Hindu nationalist gangs. But as far as, sad to see Mahathir go, by the way, because he was one of my favorite world leaders, but just because he had gigantic balls like out to here, just willing to say anything about anyone and damn the consequences. So that makes me sad to see him go. But yeah, this whole thing in India, and the fact that unfortunately the American politicians are now trying to like weaponize these riots to, I guess, shame Trump in some way, because he should be saying something. He should be getting involved. Yeah, the U.S. should really be getting involved in another foreign conflict that doesn't concern them. No, sorry, Trump should sit down and shut up and let the Indians deal with their shit. Yeah, maybe condemn it, say something, but I wouldn't even do that because he doesn't know what he's talking about. So I would say he's doing the right thing and not saying anything.
Well, when Trump goes to countries like Saudi Arabia and India and has these huge spectacles put on for him, and it strokes his ego, and he just starts like, strutting around. I mean, there is something kind of, unseemly about it. But
oh, yeah, definitely.
And especially while these, these pogroms are going on right next door. But let's move on to London, where Julian Assange is getting railroaded, and Craig Murray is writing about it. And so you can find that. You could go to Off Guardian, which is where this article is from, or you can go to Craig Murray's blog. I hope he won't be railroaded, but it doesn't look so good for him. What do you think? What are the odds that Assange will be freed? What are the odds he'll be sent to America to his probable death?
I don't even know if he'll live long enough to be sent to America. It's not looking so good over there. This is really disgusting that this is still going on. Even more disgusting that other journalists are not saying anything about it, whether because they think he's a CIA agent or because they think whatever. It doesn't matter who Julian Assange is. It matters that this will be used as a precedent to imprison and indefinitely detain journalists who get in the way of power. So like, people need to get their opinions about Julian Assange out of the way and realize how serious this case is, because this is not, if this ends the way it's looking like it's going to end, then it's going to get a lot more difficult to do the kind of work that we're doing, the kind of work that a lot of alternative media people are doing. But the UK right now, I mean, there's a sign, there's a lot of protesters outside the courthouse in, or is this is in London, right? Or yeah. Woolwich, or yeah, in London. And the guy has a sign that says, Uncle Sam wants you to be America's bitch, and it's got a picture of the British flag. So yeah, this is the UK being America's bitch and just doing our bidding, despite the fact that it violates all kinds of British laws. And it's really disgusting that the two crumbling halves of the same old empire are colluding to just kill freedom of the press. Kill it dead.
Yeah, well, we're going to keep holding up our end of freedom of the press here at False Flag Weekly News as long as we can. Who knows how long that will be these days, though? Well, moving on to Antarctica, the snow is melting in Antarctica. Maybe it will be revealing UFO bases there. That's one way out theory that's too weird for even us at False Flag Weekly News. But we will notice that Gallup is now polling Americans about their beliefs about UFOs for the first time in many, many decades. Why? Well, I'm not sure. The Gallup PR person kind of danced around that, but said there have been some credible stories about UFOs recently, and so maybe people are getting more interested again. What do you think, Helen? Do you believe in UFOs, or are you part of the 2/3 of Americans who don't believe, or the 1/3 that do believe?
Well, before I get into how I feel about UFOs, I'm just going to get back to what I was saying before about how there are 3 world uniting events that they can use when they really want to put the hex on people. And it's climate change, it's global pandemic, and it's alien invasion. So, you know, if the global pandemic thing doesn't, if the global pandemic doesn't go the way they want it to, then get ready for an alien invasion, World Wars 2.0. Although I did find it interesting, they mentioned that like 70% of the people listening to War of the Worlds knew that it was play, because that's not what we're told. We're told that everyone believed it, which I think is because they want the next time around for everybody to believe it. Now, as far as UFOs go, I would think that it would be a little bit egotistical of us as humans to think we're alone as conscious life in the universe. However, if there is some form of other life, I don't think that it would want to make contact with us, because if it was intelligent, it would realize that we're a self-destructive species and that it doesn't want to get involved. So I don't know, maybe UFOs, however, it doesn't have to be alien life. It could be any kinds of just flying things that we don't know what they are. So yeah, of course there are UFOs, and everybody knows what they look up in the sky and see a thing. They don't know what it is. That's a UFO. So, and the Navy has videos of these things behaving in weird ways that they talk about in here. So sure, there's stuff that we don't know that's going on, whether it's military hardware or weird other objects. I mean, I think we have more important things to deal with.
Well, if they really want to panic us, maybe they will have the snow will all melt in Antarctica, revealing the UFO bases from which UFOs will emerge and fly around the world, spreading a global pandemic. That would hit the whole trifecta, and it would be a planetary emergency, and they could do whatever they wanted with us. But it hasn't happened yet, and hopefully it won't have happened by next week. And if not, we'll be back. So hey, thanks, Helen. It was fun. I always enjoy having you on. Have a great week or month until we get you back again. And thank you to our loyal viewers and supporters. We couldn't do this without you. So God willing, I'll see everybody next week.